and so they're getting very interested in sort of local or regional wetlands organizations. So they had us and one other one to make a presentation at their meeting last June it was. So anyway, Kim is also a founding member, so she's been here since day one, as have I and a few others. So let's see. All right, now I'm trying to advance it. Okay, there we go. All right, too far. Okay. Okay, so we're 501c3 nonprofit, and we're incorporated in North Carolina. We were incorporated in 2015. We're a fairly young organization. We are a non-member organization. I'm not going to get into what that means, but there's just a lot more complications affiliated with being a member organization. So we call people affiliated with us supporters, and we have about 600 as of right now. And of course, they do make donations, and that's important because we do need that. We are nonpartisan, very science-based, and we advocate for wetlands. We have a board of directors of 13, of which 5 directors are from South Carolina or represent South Carolina because they have lived there. So we cover both states. We have 5 committees. I'll talk a little bit about each one of these committees. And currently we're still 100% volunteer, even though that's about ready to change. Okay, there we go. Got to get how this works. So in the beginning, I worked for state government. I worked for the North Carolina Department of Environment and Natural Resources, which no longer exists. For you who do recognize that, that was DENR at the time. My partner and I, Jenny Baker, were funded by the EPA to do wetlands research, wetlands monitoring research in particular. So we were paid by them for our salary, benefits, retirement, everything. All the supplies we needed, but we were state employees. And that's not real uncommon, but the difference in what we had to do is that we had to actually apply for grants. So we lived off of soft money for a dozen years, and it really wasn't that hard because once we got going, we did really great work, and the EPA was really, really, really happy with us. And they would send Jenny and I all over the country to talk about the work we were doing and talk about the results, because the EPA wanted other states to do this work, this monitoring of wetlands, because their logic is that we monitor our waters in terms of lakes and streams and rivers and reservoirs, but we don't monitor our wetlands, and our wetlands are every bit as critical. And so this was the EPA's attempt to get states to do that. But in 2014, and a little bit before then, the state legislature changed, as you might remember, and then we got a new governor in 2014, and he made the decision that we were not going to do any more wetlands monitoring work, even though we were totally paid by the EPA to do that. He ended it and returned $600,000 in grants that we had just been awarded by the EPA to continue doing the great work that we were doing. So I eventually left and decided to form Carolina Wetlands Association along with several other people, and here's where things started going different. So like I said, we also learned about the Wisconsin Wetlands Association. It was the story goes is that Kim, my dear friend, about 2 months before I was leaving the state government, she works at RTI International. She sent me an email with just a link on it that had Wisconsin Wetlands Association. And I clicked the link, went to their webpage, and about 2 minutes, I called Kim back up and I said, you know, I've got to do this, don't you? And she said, I figured as such. So hence it was born. And it was really Kim's idea. She thinks like she has all the brilliant ideas around here, but I tend to carry out the work. And then I attended a meeting of state wetlands managers just shortly after that and was introduced to Aaron O'Brien of the Wisconsin Wetlands Association. So she was very, very helpful. She talked to me and Christy Giannopoulos, another founder, for a couple hours there. And they have always sort of been our mentor organization. They have basically told us to take whatever we want from their webpage, make it ours to save us time, save us grief, to call them up anytime we want to and ask questions and talk to them about how to get going. And they have been around for 50 years and we have been around for 5 years, but they are real impressed with our progress. They say that we're probably at year 20 where they were easily, and so we are like 15 years ahead of our time. But I would say that that's not only because of them, but it's because of the dedication of the people we have. We had, when I left the organization and started Carolina Wetlands Association, I went and grabbed all the top wetland scientists and wetland policy experts and even environmental attorneys that I knew of to get them involved with the organization, so that we basically are a network of the best wetlands talent around. So that's where we go. So anyway, we did have our first meeting. We got incorporated and elected board of directors. We got our website launched, and in 2016 we became a 501c3 tax exempt. Our mission is, again, we are a nonpartisan science-based organization advocating for wetlands. The mission is that we promote the understanding, protection, restoration, and enjoyment of North and South Carolina's wetlands and associated ecosystems through science-based programs, education, and advocacy. And I want to emphasize science-based. We are very, very science-based. And also, I want to emphasize associated ecosystems. That's important wording, because you can't always just look at the wetland by itself. You've got to look at its associated stream or lakes or even watershed to really do the job. So it's important to have that in there too. We also came up with vision statements. We envision a present and future where the Carolinas wetlands are understood, enjoyed, and valued as integral parts of our mountain, Piedmont, and coastal ecosystems. They should be healthy, plentiful, and support our state's ecological, societal, and economic needs. The citizens of the Carolinas appreciate, and there goes my dogs, and I apologize, somebody's coming in. The citizens of the Carolinas appreciate, care for, and promote these natural treasures, which provide for clean water, fisheries, recreation, habitat, flood control, and protection against rising sea levels. And I'll go into some more detail on some of this as I go through. This is our current board of directors. The picture's not exactly accurate, but that's the best we can do. But you can see we have a pretty diverse board. We have other nonprofits represented, three universities, a couple of restoration companies, and so forth. And it's a good board. It's a really strong board, and we have worked hard to make sure the board, and it has been some turnover. It's not the same as it when it started, of course, but but it is a good, strong board and very, very diverse. What I was going to say was the asterisks are the executive committee members. So it's the 4 officers: president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary, plus 1 at large. And these 5 people meet much more regularly than the board. The board meets every other month. The executive committee meets at least every month. And by email even more frequently, because basically we are the executive director of the organization. So we have to make some decisions real fast. And so we have the executive committees committed to responding within 12 hours or so of an email that's critical, that's deemed critical. And we know each other's phone numbers, so we do that too. But it's worked very well. The board wanted a mechanism to do that because they tended to follow me too much, and I was sort of okay with it, but some of the board members were not okay with it, and that's okay. So this is the mechanism we came up with about 2-3 years ago, and it's worked very, very well. Our program committee promotes the value and services of wetlands. It's sort of our education and outreach committee, if you will. They developed education materials. They organize and participate in public events to educate the public. Some of these things are like the Amphibian and Reptile Day at the Science Museum, when they hopefully will hold it again one of these days. We have been involved with Bug Fest there, and some other events in other locations. We were involved in one down in Hilton Head not too long ago also. So, and a lot of very local events. Like, I live in Cary, so every time Cary had an event that would allow nonprofits in, Carolina Wetlands got in. So, there you go. One of the highlights of this group is the Wetland Treasures of the Carolinas. It was the first thing that we really promoted as something that we were doing, and we got a decent amount of press. But starting in May the next year, because May is American Wetlands Month, so never forget that. May is American Wetlands Month. So the May into our first year, we nominated 5 wetlands to be Wetland Treasures of the Carolinas, and we had there are always 3 in North Carolina and 2 in South Carolina, give or take 1. And we gave tours to these sites, these wetlands, and it worked out real well. The tours were a little, they were well attended, but not, let's say, full until later, like the second year when we got going. And then we even had waiting lists at times for the tours. They were very popular, and we were very excited about that. It was a great way to get people introduced to wetlands if they weren't that familiar with them. And if they were familiar with them, then it was a good way to get people out to see more and learn more about wetlands, for sure. This past year with the pandemic, we didn't get to get out. We felt it was better not to, but we created a virtual tour for these wetlands. And we had another, an environmental science student who created video tours of some of the other wetland treasures before. So I don't think every one of them's got a video tour yet, but more than half of them do, I believe. So it's good. You can go on there, and I'll show you a little bit about that in a minute. We also do things like create brochures of wetlands information, like a landowner's guide to wetland restoration we just released. It's on our website. You can download it. We haven't bothered to print it just yet because we can't go anywhere to hand it out. So when we can start doing events again, we'll do that. So anyway, so there's pictures up there. They are events. And the one on the lower right there is a summer camp that we do that's been a lot of fun. And we get kids out at the Walnut Creek Wetland Center and have them learn about wetlands. Now, this is off of our webpage. This is our Wetland Treasures of the Carolinas. This is a story map, and you can go there and click on those wetlands, and you can get pictures of the wetlands, and you can get a virtual tour if it exists. This would be an example of that. You get a virtual tour, and then you get fact sheets like this over here on the right there, and all of them have that fact sheet for sure. The fact sheets are really nicely done, and we've had teachers write to us and tell us that they have used our fact sheets in their classes, which has been real exciting. So now I'd like them to say that they've used our videos in their classes, so we'll see. So, whoops. Okay, so the Science Committee, of course, endorses scientific research. We do some reports on current research or have them report it to us. We promote the state of the wetlands in the Carolinas on our webpage. It's kind of the current status of wetlands in the Carolinas. It's updated fairly frequently, so you can go there and learn quite a bit about the status of our wetlands in terms of like number of acreage and number of some impacts and the types of wetlands and things like that. We have worked with stakeholders and landowners and conducted wetland assessments and given advice on wetland management. We've done that several times. We will do that for free because we're not doing anything jurisdictional or anything like that. We're doing it as a favor to the landowners so that they will care about their wetlands. So we have done that several times, and it's usually a lot of fun. We have one of the things we have gotten into successfully submitted the application for a Ramsar wetland of Poquoson Lakes. It's Poquoson Lakes National Wildlife Refuge. A Ramsar site is a wetland of international significance, and it's a big deal. It's named after Ramsar Iran of a meeting that took place by the United Nations in 1972, where wetlands were formally recognized as a significant ecosystem. Until then, the United Nations did not recognize wetlands as being significant ecosystems. So that happened then, and then they formed a set of criteria to be used so that nations could nominate wetlands of international significance to be hopefully forever protected. And so it turns out the United States has, I think, 30 some. There's only a few hundred worldwide. There are two in South Carolina, Bidler National Forest, northwest of Charleston, and Congaree National Forest, which is a little bit southeast of Columbia. They're both beautiful sites, and they're both wetland treasures also. So we felt like that it was really unfortunate North Carolina didn't have a Ramsar site, so we thought we would start with trying to get one or two in North Carolina and then start to see what else we can do. So we started Poquoson National Wildlife Refuge, and we got the submission done. Dr. Kurt Richardson at Duke University kind of led the effort. With George Howard of Restoration Systems and Christy Giannopoulos, our secretary. They were the key people involved with that. And they submitted the recommendations just a few weeks ago, and so we're waiting to hear whether it's accepted or not. We strongly believe it will be, and so we're very excited about that. That's a very important event, and I think a very important thing that our organization will continue to do because it's going to make it very hard for these wetlands not to be forever protected. Our development committee is kind of our backbone of the organization. It maintains lists of supporters. It takes care of funding. It develops our structure and organization, maintains the website, social media, and how information is delivered. Is responsible for marketing and advertising, and does the monthly newsletter, and also manages our cloud storage. So it's a very important committee that keeps the organization going, and it's pretty much run by Kim Matthews, our vice president. Two other committees that are very important. The policy committee, they look into various policies for the organization as to how it should operate. And the policies that sometimes committees develop their own policies, like there was a financial policy developed recently. They will review that and then submit their recommendation to the board. They will also review policies which may have an effect on the function of the organization that may be outside of the organization, and also policies that may have effect on the mission of the organization, like the rewrite of the Waters of the U.S. rule that was done recently. Our finance committee, well, it's a finance committee. It develops our budget. It keeps a record of our donations and receipts, and basically helps decide on priorities for spending money. So that's that. We did a strategic plan finally after 4 years of being in existence, and this is kind of the 7 goals. They're pretty interesting, but we want to make sure we do formal recognition for unique and vulnerable wetlands in the Carolinas. We are in the process of doing another wetland as a unique wetland, which is the State of North Carolina initiative. So there's this quote bog in the Urari Mountains that I went to just recently that has coastal plants there, and nobody quite understands that, but it's also got a couple of fairly rare amphibians living there too, and it's almost being impacted by a road widening that's taking place there. So we wanted to try to nominate that for a unique wetland because it fits all the criteria for it, so that the road widening, while it's going to happen, we don't want anything else to happen there. And so that's the reason for doing that. And I think we will be successful at that also. Um, we report on the status, trends, and value of wetlands in the Carolinas, and we do that to support good decision making by local officials, mitigation providers, educators, and the general public. We provide services, knowledge, and support of wetland protection and management to land trust and other conservation groups. We participate in regional efforts to establish relationships with county and municipal level decision makers to develop support and provide tools for wetland management. We educate Carolinians about societal and ecological wetland services to increase their understanding and appreciation of wetlands. Provide information encouragement to wetland owners to use best practices to protect and manage existing wetlands, and support public policy and increase awareness through education regarding better utilization of wetland restoration and mitigation. So these are pretty lofty goals, but we have, and since we have formed these, done the strategic plan, we have hit on every one of those to some extent, maybe not to the fullest extent. We had a lot accomplished. I'm going to talk more about those, but I'm just going to list a few here. But one of the things that I worked very hard on my first organization was getting all the other conservation groups around to know who the heck we were and why it was important for them to know who we were. So we did that. We've got great relationships with a lot of different organizations, and the Wetland Forest Initiative here is an organization that we actually helped form with several other organizations, primarily the Dogwood Alliance and the Defenders of Wildlife, and it covers the whole Southeast. So it's trying to protect wetland forests against being used for things that are not valuable to maintaining their value by standing, such as carbon sequestration, water quality, and habitat. And we were also, we have won one award. It was the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, where we were the Affiliate of the Year in 2017. We did a Wetlands Matter event at the Lake Johnson meeting room in November of 2018, and over 100 people showed up. We were very excited about that. We've been involved in several initiatives by the state of North Carolina, the Natural and Working Lands in particular. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And we've co-sponsored some conferences. We've been co-sponsoring the North Carolina Water Resource Research Institute annual meeting in March for 3 years in a row. It's not going to happen this year because of the pandemic, but we do anticipate sponsored again. And what we have done is emphasized and encouraged papers to be presented there about wetlands work. And it has been very successful and very popular. And we also helped sponsor the national meeting of the American Ecological Engineering Society that was held in Asheville a year and a half ago. And we were very proud to do that too. And so it was good. These are good things. So today we have about 650 supporters via our newsletter. We have 950 supporters through Facebook. Our annual budget, it's more than 5,000 now, but about a year ago it was about that. I'm not sure what it is now. It's the finance people. I'm going to talk about these again, but we just got funded our first grant from the EPA to establish a volunteer wetlands monitoring program. And we're going to hire a person to help manage that project. We have worked on a workshop to educate local decision makers about wetland value and nature-based solutions. I'll talk some more about that. And we're currently working with some local communities to use their wetlands to mitigate flooding. The wetlands monitoring program is, it was supposed to have gotten started last March, and well, you know what happened there, so it got delayed a year. I'm hoping we'll get started in the late spring this year, but we are doing some work to kind of make sure we're ready to go. But it is something that we are still looking for volunteers for. If you're interested, just contact me and we'll get you involved. But um, it is a grant that's actually owned by NC State University, and Carolina Wetlands Association and RTI International are subrecipients. And it is a way to try to get the wetlands monitoring project started back up again in North Carolina. And the EPA was very excited to see that. And it was interesting when I talked with them about this. They said, Rick, we didn't think we'd seen the last of you. We're very excited about this. And while we can't promise you you're going to get it, we feel really good about it. Well, we got it. So there you go. And so we're pretty excited about it. So we're going to start off really, really small. We're only going to start off with 3 wetlands right now, and then try to expand, double that over a year, and then see where we go from there as we can get more funding. We'll be having to train some volunteers in the spring sometime, but we're hoping to get going in the second quarter of 2021. So it's going to be a fun project, an interesting project. If anybody wants to get out and monitor some cool wetlands, let me know. So we have developed a workshop to educate local decision makers on wetland value and resilience. This came about because we were working with the state of North Carolina on their nat, um, natural and working lands initiative, to where we came up with recommendations to restore forest and wetlands to sequester carbon. It's part of the governor's Executive Order 80 to deal with climate change. And it's also a U.S. Climate Alliance initiative too, and they've been very supportive of that. And we have been one of the first states to put out a document on how to do this, and so it's our first draft. We've already started process on coming out with an update of the document. But the key thing is that we got a lot of work to do. The coast needs a lot of work. The coast has been impacted a lot, mostly by agriculture, and because the coast has been ditched and drained for agriculture of the wetlands. Um, with the more intense storms, the more intense rains, the flooding has increased and the ditches are no longer working. In fact, most of the time the ditches are kind of the problem now. And so we have to really go back and do a lot of wetland restoration in order to manage the water, to allow certain communities to continue to survive, and in terms of farming, to allow certain farms to survive. Not everybody's going to survive, and we kind of know that, and we kind of know where that's going to be, but we're trying to emphasize the efforts of where we think the impact is going to be and where we can do the most good. So we developed this workshop to present to local communities, to explain to them what needed to be done, because we knew that too much of the old philosophy was still there. We're getting more flooding, we need more ditches. We're getting more flooding, we need more dikes. And we can't keep up doing that. The wetlands are literally reclaiming themselves in the coastal areas, and we need to work with that and let wetlands do their job, so that maybe a lot of these communities can still operate, and a lot of these farms, or some of these farms, can still operate. So it's an important thing. We haven't done it but once. It was pretty successful, but we got called into 2 communities right away to start helping with this. And so we're planning to revive this workshop and start giving it again. We're also working with the North Carolina Office of Resilience and Recovery. So we plan to keep doing it, but we got pretty bogged down initially with the pandemic and 2 other communities I'll talk about now. The one project is Stony Run. It's in Dunn, North Carolina. The Stony Run watershed was dammed pre-1950, and everything was cool all through that time until suddenly a few years ago it started flooding. More intense rains started flooding where it was dammed up, called Hannah's Lake. And Matthew came along in 2016 and flooded so bad a person was killed. And so the community is really starting to say, okay, we can't keep having this. Something's got to change. So we were approached by the community or by members of the community who knew about us. And so we have looked over the site to determine what to do. We suspect strongly the dam is going to have to be removed, but you know, not going too far on that right now because we're working on getting a planning grant. But also, we're looking to acquire this land from private landowners. A lot of that work has already been done. Most of the landowners are in basic agreement to donate it. We're still working on some, but ultimately we'll get the funding to do the work. And we want to create a wetland park out a part of this that will hopefully draw a couple of diverse communities together and create a nice environmental equity justice kind of situation there. So this got a lot of value to the community in mitigating flooding, but also creating recreation, increasing water quality, and restoring habitat. The watershed is pretty degraded there, so we're hoping to do a lot of good work there. Um, let's see, this is the actual workshop here where we did one time. We worked with NOAA to do this. Our goal is to communicate the wetland value and their place, wetland value and their place in nature-based solutions and building community resilience. And we presented this in Wilmington at a mini workshop at a coastal issues conference put on by Sea Grant. And this is where we made a lot of our connections, and we still have communities that are still wanting to work with us. So Swansboro is the other community, and that is on the coast, and they updated their their Camel Land Development Ordinance, and declared that wetlands were critical to their survival. And that is great. We love it. That's the kind of language we like to hear, but they, as a community, have no authority to do that. So that's where we're working with them on now. We have established 3 goals with them. We have met with their town council or board of commissioners, as they call it, and their planning board. And we have 3 goals. One is to come up with a way to conserve their wetlands from further development. And the second goal is to determine what restoration work that needs to be done to mitigate flooding issues and increase other co-benefits like water quality and recreation and habitat and so forth. And the third goal is to do a lot of community outreach and education on why this is important and to get their buy-in and support. So that's in process too. We're also getting in the process of getting funding for that. So another issue area, since South Carolina, the Upper Waccamaw, we got invited to, and it's a larger effort, a little different effort. It's several organizations involved with this, so we're just one of half dozen or more. But if anybody's kept up with the Conway, South Carolina area, it seems like now it can almost rain an inch and they get flooded. It's a very serious situation. Florence probably did as much damage to Conway and maybe more than it did to Wilmington, even though Wilmington got the bulk of the rain. But a lot of the flooding that came from North Carolina went right into Conway area and to the Waccamaw. So they are in serious trouble, and some proposals are being made to try to move the water from one place to another. And if you understand the need for nature-based solutions, moving water is not the answer. It just makes the water somebody else's problem. You've got to deal with the water locally and try to allow the water to spread out and soak into the aquifer and replenish and purify. So we are working with them to come up with a strategy plan on how to do that for the area, and we're anticipating working with various groups to get funding to do some work there in the not too distant future. Um, and oddly enough, we have been helping our Native Americans, which we're very happy with. We got contacted by both of these groups, which is great. I mean, our you know, we're pretty well known, which is nice. And so the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians also got an EPA grant to do wetlands monitoring. And so they heard about our project and said, could you help us get started and tell us what you guys did and things like that. So we've been helping them along, and we anticipate visiting out there at some point. But they also said they've got some restoration work they want to consider, and they would like to consult with us on that. But it's been very nice. We're trying to get an article in our newsletter written about that soon. So I mean, that's great. I mean, it just couldn't be happier to help our friends there. And then the Waccamaw Siouan tribe in near Wilmington, it's about 30-40 miles west of Wilmington. They wanted us to come there and do a site survey of their wetlands and to let them know more or less what they had, how can they manage it, what kind of benefits can they get from it, and then something we weren't anticipating, but they wanted their youth to be educated on the value of wetlands while we were there. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but we had two wonderful supporters of Carolina Wetlands in Wilmington, that's more than two there, but they that volunteered to go out who are wetland scientists, and they went out and they said it was a great experience to meet with the tribe and the chief and to talk with their youth, and their youth also educated them on some plants, a garden that they were growing, some plants that were they said that were tradition to their tribe. So that's very, very interesting. So it was a great exchange, and we're hoping to continue that. And we've been told we might be contacted by another Native American tribe not too far from there if we can ever get past this pandemic. I think let's see. Okay. I'll mention this a little bit. I don't want to get to it too much, but it's important to understand. WOTUS is the waters of the U.S., and if you pay attention to any of this, it's been in the news a lot the last couple of years or so. Um, Realize that the Clean Water Act in 1972 made the waters of the U.S. subject to protection based on water quality, which made wetlands protected under federal law, along with rivers and streams, navigable rivers and streams. Okay. Um, so, I mean, this was a good thing. And so as time went on, the federal government set up a program with the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers and the states to protect wetlands. And if any development was going to occur that impacted wetlands or streams or rivers, they had to get permits from both the state and the Corps of Engineers. And again, the intent was to try to avoid the impact. And if you couldn't avoid the impact, definitely minimize the impact. And then if there was an impact, then most of the time it had to be mitigated. So this was a good way to protect our wetlands and to also implement the so-called no net loss clause that was done through the Bush Senior administration. In 2006, however, there was a Supreme Court decision when a landowner said that isolated wetlands were not jurisdictional because they were not subject to flowing into navigable waters. And it was a valid point, even though since then it has been proven that groundwater-wise they are in fact connected. But the Supreme Court ruled that isolated wetlands would not be protected. And so, except under a very interesting case called a significant nexus. And if you can establish that significant nexus, they can be protected. Now, the court didn't define what significant nexus meant. So the Corps of Engineers worked on it and did work to come up with a lot of paperwork for wetland delineators to determine that significant nexus. And it turns out it was a pain in the butt, as you can imagine. It was very complicated. So the purpose of the Obama rewrite that was done during that administration was to come up with a way to simplify what a significant nexus was, so that wetland delineators could do their job without getting bogged down in a complicated procedure. And so environmental groups loved it. There was a lot of misinformation put out about it, mostly by the Farm Bureau. They really got farmers up in the air about it, because they basically told farmers that every ditch they had on their land was going to be jurisdictional, which was not true at all. But that's the way they put it. I mean, it's amazing what you can do to try to get support for something. But anyway, the Trump administration came in. They nixed the Obama rewrite and did their own rewrite, and basically eliminated the whole significant nexus problem, and actually rolled back protection to what was called the Scalia decision of that 2006 court ruling, which basically said without physical evidence of that connection, then you can't say any wetland is protected. And it's been estimated that about 50% of our wetlands are no longer protected, and quite a few of our streams and rivers are no longer protected either, which means developers can go and do whatever they want to. That's not good, and we've been working with the Law Center to help them in their case against it. It's going to be heard next month. We expect it to be stayed, and that will be stopped. So anyway, I'm not going to say any more about that, but it's going interestingly. I think we'll win on that eventually. But the problem is that I keep telling people, while it wasn't perfect before 2006, at least everybody was working with it, and we were all happy. Okay, when the Supreme Court got involved with it, it has been a mess ever since then, and it's really unfortunate. So I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah, so it's interesting because recently we got involved with the fact that there's a state statute that says the state of North Carolina protects these wetlands as waters of the state, regardless. And this was, I forgot where this went back to. It was in the 1990s for sure. So it was discovered that when the waters of when the Trump rewrite, didn't protect wetlands, the state still had them protected. So that's just going crazy right now, and I'm just not going to get into it. But anyway, I want to mention that we are working really hard on climate change issues, and I've mentioned that they're working in natural lands. We've been helping with the recovery support function of the Disaster Recovery Task Force. We're involved in the South Carolina Coalition State Climate Action Plan, and we are involved with on a very local level with the Partners for Environmental Justice to have the Walnut Creek watershed in Raleigh declared a urban waters status via the EPA, which would be the 21st in the U.S., and we're working with them on that. We're also starting to work with the town of Cary on some restoration of wetlands that are really, really significant in Western Cary. So we've got our hands in stuff that's really good. Let me spend a minute. What are wetlands good for? Hopefully we all know this, but I did give a presentation one time about 4 years ago. Do you really want to drain the swamp? That was the big slogan a while ago. Our language has been very biased against wetlands. I mean, how many, you've all heard people say, gosh, I've been so busy. I've just been so bogged down with this. Well, a bog is a wetland, right? I mean, and then, I'm just swamped. I just can't get to this because I'm swamped. Okay. And then there's the movies and things like that, Swamp Thing, I mean, these are not good stuff, right? I mean, these are These are bad things, and we've got to start changing that attitude. We really do, because the language does influence how we behave toward things. So anyway, yeah, wetlands are critical to water quality. I mean, really, they do the best job of any other natural ecosystem in purifying the water, because they take the water, they hold it, they let the pollutants drop out of the water, even by just sort of flowing through the wetland and then continuing downstream. Wetlands that allow the water seep into aquifers, they get even cleaned further. So it is really a wonderful process. Flood control is critical. Floodplain wetlands are critical. The reason we have so much flooding these days is because our streams and rivers have been channelized so bad and the wetlands taken away, that the water is not allowed to do what is normal for it to do. And so we've got to restore that and bring that back in. Sea level rise, marshes on the coast, they will accrete sediment from the ocean and build upward and kind of combat sea level rise. They'll back up some, but they're building up by backing up. And that's scientific evidence to do that. People have been studying that for several years now, and it's really happening even on our coast. Um, there's a big problem, however, that when you start hitting structures, uh, the the marshes have nowhere to go, so then they die, and you lose that protection of sea level rise there. So one of the things that came out of the natural and working lands, as a matter of fact, is to come up with pathways for these marshes to continue to migrate inland and build upwards to create that protection of from sea level rise. And then shoreline stabilization is critical. You've heard of living shorelines, for example. Well, they are done with marshes in mind, and rather than building hard structures, you create living material to stabilize these shorelines and to create a more robust structure, natural structure. And again, the evidence clearly shows that this will stand up to storms a lot better and for longer periods of time. May require some maintenance on occasion, but that's not terribly surprising. Habitat is critical. Endangered species, about 50% of our endangered species require wetlands in some respect. Wetlands are good for recreation, education, and groundwater recharge. And this is, I think, from our webpage, just to give you an idea of all the various things that wetlands do. And how the various protection. Biodiversity is a critical thing. Cultural heritage, climate regulation. So anyway, I'm going to stop there because that's been 50 minutes. But again, I have to say that because we are a volunteer organization, our people are our success, and we have been so successful because we have the greatest people on earth working with us. We have 30 or 40 people that put in a lot of time, because all these projects I talked to you about can't be done by 2 or 3 people. We have to have a lot of people working hard. People who love wetlands. And these are just a few of them. Thank you very much. And there's our sponsors, by the way, our corporate sponsors. We're planning to have a lot more. So any questions, I'm available.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to put in the chat, or there is a raised hand feature towards the top of your screen. Feel free to use that if you would like to ask the question verbally. Well, I've got a question for you. So can you tell us what an urban water status is?
Yeah, yes and no. It's a fairly new thing, and I just looked it up not too long ago. But it's a project by the EPA to get urban waters mostly from minority communities as an environmental justice initiative, get these waters in a special status so that they can be, I'm going to say protected. You know, there's no legal status of it per se, but they will fund restoration. They will fund ambassadors to educate the communities about the watershed, and to try to get communities to get their local municipalities to protect the watershed. Walnut Creek is the one we're going for here. It goes all the way through Raleigh, if you're not aware of it. The Walnut Creek Wetlands Center is a critical component of that. It's in southeast Raleigh. I've been there several times, and some of the development that's occurring in Cary is going to affect the flow of the Walnut Creek, and it's if it's not the development's not done properly, then the flooding downstream is going to get bad. The Walnut Creek Wetlands Center does a great job of mitigating some of that flooding, but it's at its capacity right now. And if you have more new development, it's going to be bad. And even the southeast Raleigh, you know, the sports complex is another thing that we're worried about also. So it's that you can Google it and see more, but it's to try to get it in that special status so that the EPA will fund the local communities to do what they need to do to educate people and to try to get the local communities to protect the watershed.
So we have a question about the Uwharrie Bog, and is it in the vicinity? Where is the Uwharrie Bog, and is it in the vicinity of the Uwharrie National Forest?
It's in the Uwharrie National Forest. It's south of Troy, right beside Route 24. It's near a Wildlife Resource Commission station, and I can point it to you on the map, but it's there. It's owned by the land is owned by the U.S. Forest Service, and so they are getting permission for us to nominate it as a unique wetland, because it is very unique. I mean, it's like I said, it's got two fairly rare salamander species there and some coastal plants there that it's got to be an ice age thing or something, you know, but that's very interesting. So, you know, and I'm not a great botanist, but the botanist was there with me and he showed them to me and I said, by golly, I've seen those on the coast. So anyway, we're pretty excited about that. Yeah, the road widening is what's impacting it. That's still going to be, you know, it's not going to touch the wetland, the bog. It's not going to touch it, but it's probably within 10 or 15 feet of touching it. And so we just want to make sure that it's nothing else that's going to happen to it. And if it's a unique wetland, that gives it state status that it will not be harmed. So that's the goal.
And the question is, what type of farming is most detrimental to North Carolina wetlands?
What type of farming is most detrimental? I don't know. I'm not sure I know the answer to that, and I'm not sure there is a good answer to that. The point is that, you know, the coast was drained for agriculture, and actually even transportation at one time. I mean, think about it. When people were first settling this area, the whole coast of North and South Carolina was nothing but wetlands. And just think about trying to you know, walk from some place to some place. It took forever, you know, and so originally they were trying to build canals through some of the wetlands so they could, you know, boat through them, and then they started draining them for agriculture. So I think the thing right now is that I'm going to turn it around and make a positive out of it instead. In the northeast section of Carolina, there's the black soils area where the Pecosins wetlands are and used to be. Some of that farmland there is being turned back into Pecosins, and the peat soils there are being restored. Part of that was in Pecosin National Lakes Wildlife Refuge. Part of it is a project done by Dr. Kurt Richardson at Duke University, and we are big supporters of that, of course. And so by restoring these wetlands in their peat soils like to suck carbon in like you wouldn't believe. That's mostly what they are in that soil, is carbon. And they are a great climate change fighter. So if we could get some of these farmlands, and that's what Kurt Richardson is doing, is turning 10,000 acres of farmland, previous farmland, back into Pocosin. And that's going to be a big benefit there. We need to do more of that, especially with farmland that we know is probably not going to make it. Some farms are not going to make it. Some farms are getting salt intrusion already. The salt intrusion is happening a lot faster than the predictions were made. It's already happening to some farms, and um, they're the ones that's probably not going to make it, and they need to start thinking that way. And the state needs to come up with a buyout program for them. And they do have a floodplain buyout program, but we've been advocating a program to buy out farmland that's not going to be any longer farmed. So we have to learn. We have to learn to live with both, and that's the key thing, I think.
Another question is, are you working on the Scuppernong water projects as well?
No. We are a little bit involved with Lake Mattamuskeet, sort of on the side there. That's the Coastal Federation project. So we've got our fingers in it a little bit, kind of advising a little bit, but I'm keeping watch of what's going on there, because I just, again, I'm not going to criticize anything, and I'm not. So my concern is that we have to make sure that when we do big restoration projects like that we're doing them in the right areas where we know we're going to be successful in dealing with the sea level rise. And unfortunately, a lot of Hyde County and Dare County in that area is not going to make it because it's only 3 feet above sea level. I've been in that area a lot, and a lot of that area is just going to be flooded, and that's all there is to it. And so we just need to be sure we know we have considered all of these factors in when we do projects like that. And so I have talked to them. I have expressed my concern. They assured me they have considered all of that, and so I am going with it.
Jesse, you have a question.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to type this one out, but it's kind of a long one. So in the archaeological world, I know there's a lot of concern about a lot of those sites going underwater that are along the eastern shore. And given that you guys are working with, you said it was the Cherokee tribe out there in the eastern portion of North Carolina, are you guys working at all with archaeologists as you're doing these restoration projects? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, yes and no. Not directly, but when you do a project like that, you're supposed to get, an archaeologist expert to take a look and make sure that nothing is there of any significance before you start doing your work. So that's a process that I think we'll have to go through. But yeah, that's a good point, and I think that's important. We do have a couple of people on in our organization is very interested in the cultural aspects of wetlands and their historic value and things like that. So I think that's a good point, and I'm glad you reminded me of that because I need to keep that in consideration. Some of you might know and have read recently some articles about the Dismal Swamp in North Carolina and Virginia as being a area for runaway slaves, pre-Civil War, and they lived there. Apparently, they lived there for years in the wetlands. I mean, really, really cool wetlands, because nobody else wanted to go in there. They were pretty safe, and so I have told our friends that I think our next Ramsar site and probably wetland treasure should be the Dismal Swamp because of as much for its cultural value as for its ecological value. So.
Well, we've hit the end of our time now. I want to say thank you, Rick, for talking with us tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I will be sending out a EE form to everyone for those of you that need it tomorrow morning. If you have any issues with it, please let me know. And then don't forget next month we will be having another lecture. Again, this will be held virtually. So please pre-register so that we can get you an invitation link to the lecture prior to it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad. Thank you all for attending. Okay. And thank you, Judith. I appreciate it.
Happy to have you.
All right. See you later. Bye.
Bye.